Go fuck yourself in there, parasite.
The one who spat those words at me was my own daughter, Natalie. She twisted her lips into a cruel smirk, one that no child should ever direct at their own mother. Standing beside her, grinning just as maliciously, were my husband, Daniel, and his mother, Patricia. This had been my life ever since I married into this family. Daniel and Patricia worked together to torment me, using me as their personal punching bag to relieve their daily stress. To them, I was just a convenient target, and I had been shoved into this tiny storage room. Even Robert, the only person who had ever been on my side, was gone. I was doomed to live out the rest of my days in humiliation, trapped in this house of nightmares. At least, that's what Daniel and Patricia thought. But reality had other plans. After this, because of a certain action I took, Daniel and Patricia would soon find themselves in their own personal hell. My name is Emma Carter, and I'm a 43-year-old part-time homemaker. I'm average-looking, have a typical build, and my academics and athletic abilities are just about average. I'm just an ordinary person you find anywhere. The college I attended was also pretty standard, and after spending 4 uneventful years there, I landed a job at a mid-sized local company. It's peaceful and all, but life feels kinda boring without any excitement. Honestly, I should have been grateful just to have secured a job during an economic downturn, but at the time, I was getting tired of my predictable daily routine. Then one day, the company entered its busy season, and as part of the accounting department, I found myself working overtime almost every day. That day, I stayed late again, and as I dragged my exhausted self toward the station, I suddenly noticed something. Oh, I hear a guitar. Curious, I followed the sound and spotted a man performing a street gig in a small plaza near the station. That man was none other than Daniel, who would later become my husband. From then on, Daniel continued playing street gigs near the station from time to time. One day, I finally gathered the courage to talk to him. I had always been intrigued by Daniel's unconventional way of life. Things progressed smoothly from there, and before I knew it, we were dating.
My self-produced CDs are selling really well. I think I'll try taking them to a record label soon.
Daniel dreamed of making it big and would constantly write songs, bringing them to record labels in hopes of getting signed. I quietly supported him from the sidelines, believing in his dream. And then, 1 year after we met, Daniel came to me with exciting news.
Someone from a record label offered me a debut. My dream is finally coming true.
Really? That's amazing, Daniel. Congratulations. A record label had reached out to him after he submitted his music, offering him a chance to debut. After celebrating for a moment, Daniel suddenly got serious and looked me in the eye.
Emma, thank you for always supporting me. If you're okay with someone like me, would you stay by my side forever?
Wait, does that mean?
Yeah, Emma, Will you marry me?
I was overjoyed and immediately said yes to his proposal. With both our wedding and his major debut lined up, we were living in pure happiness. But then, everything took a sudden turn. The record label that had promised Daniel his debut went bankrupt due to financial struggles. Along with it, his dream of making it big disappeared. He tried submitting his music to other record labels, but none of them even gave him a second glance. Eventually, Daniel gave up on his music career.
Considering my age, it's probably best to call it quits now.
When I was 27 and Daniel was 29, he made the tough decision to let go of his dream. After that, he found a job at a regular company. It was disappointing that he couldn't achieve his dream, but having a stable job and a steady life wasn't so bad either. Maybe it's time for us to start thinking about having kids.
Yeah, you're right. Let's build a happy family together.
However, Daniel wasn't the type to stick with a job for long. Not even 6 months after starting at a company, he quit.
Sorry. I just couldn't handle my boss constantly picking on me.
It's okay. I just hope you find a better place next time. At first, I tried to be supportive. But after that, he kept quitting job after job. Every time, it was something his boss was too harsh. The workload was too heavy. Every time Daniel quit a job, he had an excuse. But after so many job changes, I started to wonder if the real issue was his personality. And then, I found out I was pregnant. I had always wanted a child, but with Daniel's unstable work situation, I couldn't help but feel anxious about bringing a baby into this life. Now that we're having a baby, you need to stick with your job this time, okay?
I know. I get it.
But just a month after I found out I was pregnant, Daniel quit his job again. Enough already. My paycheck alone isn't enough to cover rent and living expenses. At this rate, I won't be able to properly raise this baby. Until now, I had never gotten this angry when Daniel quit his jobs. But this time was different. His reckless choices weren't just affecting me anymore. They were impacting our unborn child too. I needed him to understand that, so I scolded him harshly.
I'm sorry.
Daniel looked down, sulking after my outburst. Then suddenly, he lifted his head and blurted out a suggestion.
If paying rent is so tough, why don't we move in with my parents? Your folks live far away, but mine are less than an hour's drive from here.
If you just held down a steady job, we wouldn't have to do that. I said it out loud, but my mind was already racing with another thought. If this situation keeps up, my savings will eventually run out. If I want to give our baby a stable life, relying on Daniel's parents might be the only realistic option. To be honest, I don't like the idea of living with them, but at this point, I might not have a choice. And so, we moved in with Daniel's parents. But that decision only led to even more trouble.
Emma, this spot is still dirty. Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can slack off.
Daniel's mother, Patricia, was incredibly strict with me. Actually, strict wasn't the right word. It was straight up bullying. I looked at the dirty spot she was pointing at. There was nothing there except a single strand of hair. "I'll clean it now." I couldn't help but think, if she noticed it, why doesn't she just clean it herself? But I kept quiet and did as Patricia said. One time, I tried pushing back just a little, but Patricia completely lost it, raging in a way that was honestly shocking. If it were just me, I wouldn't care, but I had a baby growing inside me. If she ever lost control and laid a hand on me, my child could be in danger. That day, Patricia was so furious that if things had escalated just a little more, she might have actually hit me. Because of that, I've kept my mouth shut and just obeyed her ever since.
You're such a useless daughter-in-law.
Even when I obediently did as she asked, Patricia still found something to complain about. She only complained to me and did none of the housework.
Emma, ever since you moved in, our house has been so much cleaner, and your cooking is great. But are you okay? You're not overworking yourself, are you?
The only saving grace in this household was Daniel's father, Robert. He was usually busy with work and wasn't home much, but whenever we saw each other, he always spoke kindly to me. More than that, Patricia would act more restrained in his presence, so just having him around was a relief. "I'm totally fine, but you should take care of yourself too, Robert." I had considered confiding in Robert about Patricia's mistreatment more times than I could count. But I didn't want to burden him with this kind of thing when he was already busy with work. Besides, every time he came home, he looked completely drained. I just couldn't bring myself to tell him that his wife was bullying me. Well, I guess as long as I can just brush it off, it'll be fine. After 6 months of living there, I had gotten used to this life. Around that time, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl.
I was hoping for a boy.
That was Patricia's reaction, but despite her comment, our daughter, Natalie, grew up happy and healthy. Even Daniel seemed to have turned over a new leaf after Natalie was born. His latest job was the longest he had ever kept. But the chaos wasn't over yet. "Oh, I fell asleep. Wait, where's Natalie?" After so many sleepless nights from taking care of Natalie's crying, I was completely exhausted. I had dozed off for a bit, and when I woke up, my baby who had been sleeping right next to me was gone. "Where is she?" I frantically searched the entire house, but Natalie was nowhere to be found. Just then, Patricia, who had apparently gone out, came back home.
I'm home.
"Patricia, I can't find Natalie anywhere." "Wait, what?" I rushed over to Patricia in a panic. And there, in her arms, I found Natalie fast asleep. As I stood there, stunned, Patricia casually handed her over to me, as if nothing had happened.
My friend wanted to see Natalie's face, so I took her to visit.
She said it so nonchalantly, but I couldn't hold back my outrage. You took her out without my permission.
Why would I need your permission? She's my granddaughter.
Before she's your granddaughter, she's my daughter. What if something had happened while you were out? Would you take responsibility? All the mistreatment I had endured from Patricia, I had never reacted this angrily before. For the first time, she actually looked a little flustered.
Geez, you're overreacting.
She huffed and hurried inside the house. But after that, Patricia kept trying to take Natalie out without asking or feed her things a baby couldn't eat. Luckily, because I kept a close eye on her after that incident, none of the attempts were made. However, since she couldn't do whatever she wanted with Natalie, she started taking her frustrations out on Daniel instead.
Hey, don't you think you're being too harsh on my mom? You should try being nicer to her.
One day, Daniel, who didn't lift a finger to help with the housework or child rearing, had the audacity to lecture me. She's the one being harsh. Just the other day.
Stop. I don't want to hear it. I'm exhausted from work. Unlike you, who just sits around at home all day.
I wasn't just sitting around. I was the one handling everything in the house because Patricia refused to do any chores. She never helped with raising Natalie either, so I had to do it all on my own. But no matter how much I explained, Daniel would never understand how hard it really was. After that, he started nagging me about everything. I can't rely on Daniel. If I stay here any longer, my stress is going to break me. Maybe if I find a daycare and go back to work, I won't have to see Patricia as much. Robert was the busiest person in the house, so I couldn't rely on him either. I searched for a daycare on my own, enrolled Natalie, and returned to work.
These days, moms just dump their kids on others and call it parenting.
That's what Patricia said when I went back to work, but I ignored her. In the midst of all this, Daniel quit his job again, so in a way, it was good timing for me to return to work. Even while unemployed, Daniel didn't bother helping with housework or parenting. He just lazed around while Patricia never criticized him, only nitpicking everything I did. Despite the toxic environment, Natalie continued to grow up happy and healthy. Before I knew it, she was in middle school. But lately, she hardly spoke to me. She only talked to Patricia and Daniel.
Natalie is much closer to us.
Patricia said that with a smug smile as I sat alone in the house, completely isolated. Instead of easing up, her bullying had only gotten worse. She openly insulted me in front of Natalie now. Natalie just watched in silence, showing no reaction.
You're on my side, aren't you, Natalie?
Yeah.
Patricia had completely turned Natalie against me, and she seemed happier than ever. I couldn't say anything. I could only watch from the sidelines. I thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, but bad events just kept piling up.
Hey Emma, did you take my suit to the dry cleaners?
No, you never asked me to.
I told you I have my class reunion tomorrow. Of course I need my suit. You're so useless.
Lately, Daniel had started speaking to me the same way Patricia did. He still jumped from job to job and was now working part-time at a nearby factory. He spent every last cent of his paycheck on himself, never contributing a dime to the household. How much longer can I keep living like this? I muttered under my breath, but no one was listening. The thought of spending the next several decades in this house filled me with dread. I desperately wanted to change my life, but I had no idea how. So, I just endured each day. But then, that day came, suddenly and without warning. One day, Robert suddenly collapsed at work and never came back. The cause was his heart failure. He had never been in the best health, and the sudden cold snap combined with his workload had put too much strain on his body. It's too soon, Robert. I was the one who handled all his funeral arrangements by myself. Patricia and Daniel dumped all the troublesome tasks on me, not lifting a finger to help. With Robert gone and no one left on my side, even more misfortune came my way.
I'm turning your room into my personal storage space.
What? One day, Patricia suddenly announced this and made me pack up my things. Well, where will my new room be?
This one.
She led me to a tiny, cluttered storage room. It was about the size of a small walk-in closet that she had been using before.
I used to keep stuff here, but I ran out of space.
When I turned to look at her, she was smirking with a nasty grin. I stood there, stunned, when Daniel and Natalie walked in.
Oh, moving to a new room? It's small and cramped, just like you.
Daniel laughed at me like it was some kind of joke. That smirk. It's just like Patricia's.
Hey, Natalie, say something to her.
She stared at me for a moment, then slowly curled her lips into a sneer.
Go fuck yourself in there, parasite.
Patricia and Daniel burst into laughter at her words.
Natalie, don't make me laugh.
Where do you even learn stuff like that?
Cackling with crude laughter, the three of them walked away from the storage room. I stood there, staring at their backs in stunned silence. What am I supposed to do with my stuff? With everything I owned, there was no way I could fit it all in that tiny room. But if I left my things in the hallway, Patricia or Daniel might just throw them out. I somehow managed to cram everything into the tiny space and sat down with a sigh. Then, a small envelope slowly slid under the closed door.
Mom, read this.
Natalie's voice came from the other side. I quickly grabbed the letter and opened it.
The plan will be executed in 3 days.
That was all it said. All right. I whispered my response softly. 5 days later. Patricia and Daniel had been traveling together since 3 days before.
Now that we're getting Robert's inheritance, why don't we splurge on a nice vacation?
It hadn't even been that long since Robert passed, yet Patricia made the suggestion with an excited smile. Of course, the only ones she was inviting were Daniel and Natalie. As they chatted in the living room, I silently cleaned up after everyone's dinner in the kitchen.
Oh, sounds good. I've been wanting to relax and unwind for a while now.
Unwind from what? It's not like you actually work. But no one called him out on it.
A trip? I'll pass.
Oh, why's that?
I have a big competition coming up for my club. I need time to practice, so you two go ahead without me.
Natalie smiled as she spoke, and Patricia and Daniel nodded approvingly.
You're so responsible, Natalie, unlike some people.
Good luck with your training. We'll bring back lots of souvenirs for you.
Thanks, I'm looking forward to it.
And with that, Patricia and Daniel left for their 2-day trip. Today was the day they were supposed to return. But no matter how long I waited, neither of them showed up. Instead, my phone rang. It was Daniel. Hello?
Where the hell are you?
He shouted so loudly that I immediately pulled the phone away from my ear, wincing. Geez, don't yell. You're annoying. I'm hanging up.
I asked you where you are.
Daniel completely ignored what I said and just kept yelling. I let out a long, exaggerated sigh before telling Daniel where I was. Where am I? At my temporary apartment. Not giving you the exact address, though. That's right. I wasn't at his parents' house anymore. I had moved into a monthly rental apartment far away from their place. While Patricia and Daniel were off enjoying their vacation, I packed my things and left. And I didn't leave alone.
Mom, what's wrong?
I had moved into this apartment with my daughter, Natalie.
I just heard Natalie's voice. And her stuff is gone too. I knew it. You kidnapped her. Give her back. What the hell are you thinking?
Daniel's relentless shouting exhausted me. Seeing my frustration, Natalie took the phone from me.
Dad, calm down.
Natalie, are you okay?
His words made it sound like I was some kind of kidnapper, and it irritated me. But Natalie, completely calm, responded coolly.
That's a weird question. Of course I'm fine. But I need to talk to you. Meet me at the cafe by the station tomorrow. Bring Grandma too.
Natalie hung up without waiting for his response. Then, she turned to me with a gentle smile.
It's almost over.
Yeah, it is. The smile she gave me now was completely different from the one she wore the day she helped push me into that tiny storage room. It was warm, free of any malice. The next day, Natalie and I sat at the designated cafe, waiting for Patricia and Daniel. About 10 minutes past the scheduled time, they finally walked in. As soon as they spotted me, their faces twisted with rage, and they stormed over.
Hey, what the hell do you think you're? Wait.
Hey, who's that guy?
Patricia pointed at the man in a suit sitting next to me. The man calmly stood up, pulled out a business card, and introduced himself.
Nice to meet you. I'm Sam Thompson, an attorney. The late Robert was a great help to me during his time.
The word attorney made Daniel and Patricia's eyes widen. Sam's next words were so shocking that both of them looked like they were about to jump out of their seats.
Robert's entire inheritance will be given to this young lady, Natalie.
Wait a minute. As his wife, I'm supposed to get everything.
Patricia, shocked but desperate, pressed Sam for answers. Without changing his expression, he simply stated the facts.
Robert left a will. In it, he clearly stated that all his assets would go to Natalie. I was once the corporate attorney for his company, and during that time, he helped me a great deal. Even after I left that position, we remained in contact, and one day, he asked me to draft his will.
Daniel and Patricia were stunned into silence, taking in what they had just heard. After a long pause, it seemed they finally grasped the reality of the situation.
I had no idea he left a will. I have a lot to say about that, but we'll deal with it later. More importantly, did you already know about this? Is that why you kidnapped Natalie?
Kidnapped? Don't be ridiculous. This was planned long ago. Natalie and I carefully prepared everything before leaving that house.
What?
Daniel's voice came out weak, his face utterly confused.
You planned this with Natalie. What are you talking about? She was on our side.
I don't remember ever being on your side. I've always been on Mom's side.
That's right. Natalie had never been one of them. She had been my ally all along. From a young age, Natalie questioned why Patricia treated me so badly. One day, she asked her directly,
Grandma, why are you so mean to Mom?
Patricia responded without hesitation.
Your mom is a very bad person. That's why I have to scold her, to turn her into a better person.
Natalie was still little, so she believed Patricia's words. But as she grew older, she started realizing that what Patricia was doing was nothing but bullying. Determined, Natalie tried to confront her again.
You know, I've been thinking about this for a while. You really need to stop Grandma.
Patricia's expression twisted into something terrifying.
So you're on her side?
Natalie was so shaken by the sheer intensity of Patricia's glare that she couldn't say another word. When Patricia got angry, there was no reasoning with her. Even though she was getting older and weaker, Natalie was still just a kid. If Patricia ever lost control, it would be easy for her to hurt her. Having witnessed this firsthand, I later pulled Natalie aside when Patricia wasn't around and asked her to do something for me. Natalie, don't act close to me when Patricia is around. If you stay on her good side, you'll be safe.
But
It's okay. I don't mind. And so, Natalie started acting distant toward me in front of everyone. Sometimes, when Patricia pressured her, she even insulted me against her will. But in her heart, she was always apologizing to me.
if this keeps up, Mom will just keep getting hurt.
After struggling with it for a long time, Natalie finally decided to tell Robert about it when she was in middle school. At first, Robert didn't believe her. After all, Patricia and Daniel always acted perfectly normal around him.
Please, Grandpa, you have to believe me.
Natalie pleaded with him desperately. Because Robert was always busy with work, he was hardly ever home, and they rarely talked. To him, Natalie was his beloved granddaughter, but to her, he was the most distant family member. She had never spoken to him so emotionally before. Seeing the look on her face, Robert understood that this was serious.
I see. All right. I believe you, Natalie.
Really?
Yes. I'll see if there's something I can do.
Robert trusted Natalie's words, but he wanted to see it with his own eyes. So he secretly set up cameras around the house. And that's when he witnessed Patricia and Daniel hurling insults at me. When Patricia and Daniel were out, Robert called Natalie and me over and apologized.
I'm so sorry I didn't realize this sooner. Emma, you need to divorce Daniel. I'll support you.
But I shook my head. If I divorce Daniel, I'll have to leave you behind, Robert, and I can't bear that. Besides, no offense, but Patricia doesn't do any housework, does she? I want to keep taking care of the household and supporting you.
Emma,
I don't want to be apart from you either. If Mom and Dad get divorced, of course, I'll go with Mom, but that would mean I'd be separated from you, Grandpa. I don't want that.
Robert thought about her words for a while. Then, he made a surprising decision.
all right. Then I'll leave my entire inheritance to Natalie.
What? But why?
It may not be enough to make up for all the trouble I've caused, but I want you to have it. Honestly, after seeing how terribly Patricia and Daniel treat Emma, I've completely lost any respect for them. I don't want them to get a single cent of my inheritance.
Then, he smiled gently and continued.
Emma has been saving money responsibly, so she doesn't really need my inheritance. I'll have my lawyer handle the paperwork, but if I say I'm leaving it to my daughter-in-law, people might start asking unnecessary questions. Not that I think my lawyer would do anything like that, but still. Besides, publicly, it makes more sense for my inheritance to go to my granddaughter rather than my son's wife.
Hearing his reasoning, I nodded in agreement. Since Daniel barely worked and never contributed to household expenses, money was always tight. However, I had been working hard, and my salary had gradually increased. I didn't waste any extra money and put everything I could into savings. So as Robert said, I had built up a decent amount of savings. Besides, Thinking about our future, even if I were to receive Robert's inheritance, I wouldn't end up using much of it. I would eventually pass it down to Natalie anyway. In that case, it made more sense for her to inherit it from the start. That's how it was decided. Robert's inheritance would go to Natalie.
I'll talk to the lawyer myself and get the will drafted as soon as possible. But just in case something happens, would it be all right if I gave the lawyer your contact information, Emma?
Robert's question made me hesitate. Patricia often snooped through my phone. If the lawyer ever contacted me, Patricia would definitely get suspicious.
In that case, just give them my number. My phone isn't being spied on.
At Natalie's suggestion, we decided to use her phone as the emergency contact instead of mine. Then, after Robert passed away, on the day I was forced into that tiny storage room, Natalie received a call from Sam.
All the necessary procedures are complete. We can move forward whenever you're ready. What would you like to do?
After receiving that message, Natalie slipped me a note saying the plan would be carried out in 3 days. We waited for Patricia and Daniel to leave for their trip and used that opportunity to move out. Alongside the chaotic move, we coordinated with Sam to finalize everything. Now, with all the preparations complete, we were finally sitting across from Patricia and Daniel. And that's the full story. After hearing the entire truth from me, the two of them sat there in stunned silence, unable to believe what they had just heard. Patricia was the first to snap back to reality. She immediately turned to me and started screaming.
This is unbelievable. You're not getting a dime of the inheritance, and you're definitely not taking Natalie. If you want to leave, then go alone.
But before I could respond, Natalie fired back without hesitation.
There's no way I'm living with you and Dad. You two can enjoy each other's company. I'm leaving with Mom.
Patricia stood frozen, completely caught off guard by Natalie's firm words. Then, I turned to Daniel, who was still sitting there in shock. Just so we're clear, I'm divorcing you. With Robert gone, there's no longer any reason for me to stay married to you. The only reason I hadn't divorced Daniel earlier was because I didn't want to be separated from Robert. But now, with that reason gone, there was only one option left for me: divorce.
Wait. No, please. Think this through.
Daniel, finally realizing just how bad his situation was, panicked and raised his voice. After Robert's passing, Daniel had quit his job again. He had assumed that with Robert's inheritance, he wouldn't need to work ever again. But now, without that money, finding a new job would be nearly impossible, especially with his long history of quitting.
That's right. Think it over, Emma. Are you really going to abandon us?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I answered without hesitation, and Patricia stared at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. I let out a sigh, making no effort to hide my exasperation. Patricia, you've been tormenting me for years. Of course, I hate you. And Daniel, not only did he turn a blind eye to your bullying, but he started joining in. I hate both of you. Why would I go out of my way to help people I despise? I'll gladly walk away and leave you behind. Patricia's face turned pale, and cold sweat started forming on her forehead. Beside her, Daniel was visibly shaking. This is nothing more than the consequences of your own actions. If you had been decent people, this wouldn't have happened. Back then, I had been drawn to Daniel precisely because he wasn't ordinary. But now, I understood. Being ordinary is something truly wonderful. It just took me far too long to realize it. If you've got a problem with this, go hire a lawyer. Not that you have the money or resources for that. My words must have been the final blow. Patricia and Daniel's faces went completely blank, drained of all emotion. The two of them could do nothing but sit there in shock, looking like empty shells. Leaving them behind in their daze, we walked out of the cafe. I left the divorce and inheritance proceedings in Sam's hands. Daniel initially tried to contest the divorce, but when Sam responded with, "Shall we take this to court?" he quickly backed down and agreed to it. And with that, I was finally free. I didn't ask Daniel for child support. Natalie refused it.
If we accept child support, that means I'd have to see Dad, right? I never want to see him again. I don't want to think of someone who enjoyed bullying Mom. And of course, I never want to see Grandma either. I won't even attend her funeral, so don't expect me to.
When we met with Daniel and Patricia for the last time at Sam's law office, they broke down in tears, desperately begging Natalie to stay.
Emma, say something.
Please, Emma.
But I coldly rejected them. I'm not interfering with Natalie's decision. And besides, didn't I tell you? I hate both of you. Why would I ever grant a favor to people I despise? That was the end of it. Even after Natalie and I left the law office, the two of them reportedly just sat there in silence, crying. With Robert's inheritance gone and me, their only source of income, out of the picture, their lives quickly fell into financial ruin. Daniel managed to find a part-time job, but his wages weren't nearly enough to support both of them. Eventually, they were forced to sell the house. I have no idea where the two of them are or what they're doing, and I have no interest in finding out. But one thing I do know, they're not living a good life. Meanwhile, Natalie and I moved from our temporary apartment into a small, cozy house. It was the perfect size for the two of us, and it even had a garden. As I looked out at the spacious yard, a memory of Robert came to mind.
I really like tulips. They push through the soil and bloom beautifully after surviving the harsh winter. I've always wanted to grow them once I retire.
I love tulips too. If you start gardening, can I help?
Of course, I'd love that. I can't wait for that day.
I never got to fulfill my dream of gardening with Robert, but both Natalie and I hold on to the many warm memories we made with him. Someday, Natalie and I will plant tulips in our garden, just like Robert always wanted.